Okay, we have the National Ice Cream Day Rapid Analysis. The tournament was a rapid tournament, and it was a 15 plus 10 time control, so 15 minutes plus a 10-second increment, 5-round Swiss, and the winner of Thornhill Chess Club tournaments, their games are analyzed and uploaded to YouTube, recorded and uploaded to YouTube, and in the first game, well, our winner was Tony W0505. I will only reveal Wii Chess usernames. And in the first game, we had the winner of this tournament. We'll call him Tony. He had white in this position, in this game, and he opened with D4. And I'm not going to show the moves. But we have D4, Knight F6, G3, Bishop G2. So this is setting up for a Catalan style opening, but C4 has not been played yet. And I'm not so sure that Black wants to play C5 because he doesn't know the line and the theory behind it. But yeah, if C5 is played, we could probably have let's just close that. We could probably have C4, because the opening of the center would probably benefit white. Maybe even D5, Knight C3, B5 would run into D6. So I don't know if Black would want to open up the position yet. So that's why we have C6. Now I wouldn't play C6 if C4 has not been played yet, because C6, there's no need to play C4. You can play more patient because the knight cannot develop to C6. So we have Knight F3, Bishop F5. Okay, probably going for a London style setup. Finally, we have C4 right after Knight BD7 gets played. So assuming that we have a capture, this will sort of be an argument against the fact that the knight has been developed here, and maybe Black should have waited with E6 and then after C4, and if hypothetically there's a capture, the knight can come to C6. It has not committed to D7. You basically know where the other pieces are going to develop, so there's no reason to play the knight out yet. You can just finish your pawns, finish your structure, because we all know where this E-pawn is going, and we're not going to have E5 anytime soon. But okay, we have E6, Queen B3. There is basically two ways white can go from here. Queen B3, like what we just saw, or Knight H4, going after this bishop, and maybe after F3 you can, or maybe after Bishop B4 you could have F3 and the bishop would go back, or maybe prepare that with Knight D2 protecting the pawn, and now let's say after Bishop D6, Bishop B4 would no longer work because of the capture. And even though this might be trapped, you might have something like this knight might be trapped with something like H6 and G5. That's not going to happen anytime soon. That would take a while, and it would weaken the king side. The bishop covers G5, and this bishop will move sometime soon, and the structure is a little weird. Even though Black got the light square bishop out, you can have Queen C2 maybe targeting the pawn. How are you going to defend it, really? And Black doesn't want to open up the center just yet with E5 or C5, because the knight can come here, and also the king is still in the center. And also white has the bishop pair. So in these positions, you usually have, because the bishop has gone to F5, this pawn is a little weak, and it's easy to harass this bishop. White usually gets the bishop pair and tries to open up the center. Maybe go for E4 sometime in the future. We have Queen B3, Queen B6, offering queen trade. Now if you take, this is going to open up the A file, and this will actually be better for Black, because now he has this pawn mass that he can use to harass you if you're white, and he can actually develop normally, and there's very good control over E4. This pawn controls C4, and the queens are off the board. So you don't want to trade the queen just yet, and in fact, you don't want to waste a move trying to get the queen on B6. You want him to come to you. So Black has moved the queen twice, and there's and white has moved the queen once and now has opened the a file, developed the knight. Maybe we would see something like bishop c2, but probably knight d2 to cover these two, and this bishop is not doing anything. Yeah, this bishop cannot move, but e4 might be coming soon, like after bishop d6, e4, this, and something like this, bishop c7. And yeah, there's a bit of a weakening of the dark squares, but white has a lot of space. That could have happened, but instead we don't have queen there, queen captured. We actually have a blunder from black, because now this bishop is protected by the queen, and even though it's attacking the knight, what happens when the queen can't defend the bishop? You're going to lose it. So white actually misses the correct move. You can pause the video. White to play and win this bishop. How do you exploit the fact that black just lazily develops his bishop? And we'll give you some time. Well, I'll show you what white played in the game. We had c5, which is the correct move, but bishop d2. Even though the queen can defend on a5, this bishop has nowhere to go. And if the queen ever moves back, this bishop is lost. So what you need to do is, you need to bring the knight back, because now there's no capture on c3, and a3 is coming. And a3, not to capture with the pawn, but to capture with the queen, because the rook would be lost. And this bishop has nowhere to go. If you try and move the queen here, you will see a4 maybe, or you would see even not a4. You would see. Let me just enable the engine right here. I think the move is. I think the fact that this bishop is here like that, like the engine is recommending something like this, but wait a minute. What happens if you just take? Okay, but the engine says this bishop is lost. Like what happens after this? You have b4, bishop c7, a6. Wait a minute, this bishop is not lost. I thought the engine had said it's lost, but apparently this structure is so good for white that white is +3. +3, even though equal material, this structure of the pawns is so good. Like b6 will not damage it at all. Like let's say you have bishop g5. Apparently this is just winning, because you'll have a4, and you're going to completely break through. You're going to have a connected pass pawn on c5. Wow. So the best move was in fact c5, because knight d1, you just exploit the poor position of this bishop, and after the sequence of moves, even though this bishop gets out, the concession is the fact that you get such a horrible pawn. Black gets such a horrible pawn structure and barely any space. I mean, engines are weird. So, black is actually right that it's not trapped, but you can get a very easy position pawn structure that will lead to a win, apparently. So we have bishop d2, and after bishop d2, now black should take, because white can't play knight d1 anymore. Like here, bishop d2 doesn't do anything, because this bishop can trade itself off. Well, the point of c5 was to exploit the fact that the mobility of the queen and bishop is reduced. You need to move the knight so that the bishop can't trade itself off. You move the knight away and get a very good pawn structure. But bishop d2 castles and bishop f4. I think in this position, white had realized that the positioning of the bishop is so poor that this knight needs to be moved. And it couldn't move to d1 here because of the bishop on d2. And black doesn't notice it. Just rook e8. And now we have knight b1. Because now, again, this should have been played. This was the move. But we have b6, and now that bishop is lost. It can't be captured just yet. Not with a takes. You play rook a2, and this bishop again is nowhere to go. The pawn is in the way. So you have queen b6. I would have preferred something like this maybe. And after queen takes, even though you're down a piece, you have this pawn mass in the center that you're going to use to attack white. But instead, we don't have that. We have queen b6, and now it's different because the queens are not on the board. And it's, what's it called? In this position, it's black's turn to move. But after this, it is white's turn to move, and he can plant something on e5. We have knight takes, a5 to attack the pawn. Now, black is down a piece, but look at all these pawns. Just so much control over the board and over the center. We have queen a4. Look at that. If you take, there's going to be this capture. And black is just losing. There's no way to defend the back rank. So this pawn is pinned, but however, you could simply play queen b7, and again, this pawn, or even, I guess, rook c8. Actually, no, that does nothing. And black just loses a pawn. And after a take, b takes a. Now you can take this pawn, and black lost his counterplay. Now we just have consolidation. f4, stabilize that knight after being attacked. Knight a5. Knight invades, and the rook sacrifices because where are you really going to move this rook? If you move it to d8, you're going to have knight c6. If you move it to e8, you probably have knight c6 or even bishop c6 and then b5. And maybe even knight d7. I mean, this position is just so bad for black, and there's a sacrifice. And look, you don't look at that. You don't even trade because you don't want to weaken the light squares. You want to protect the pawn. Knight d7. Knight takes c5. Rook takes c5. Queen takes. Look at that because of the pin. And even though, actually no, in this position, the pawn is taken. Knight for rook. So what we just had was the rook. So white sacrificed bishop and knight for rook and pawn, but there's two rooks and a knight and a bishop. So this is easily winning. And after b7, black resigns. And that was the first game. So let's actually look at the time control. Look how much time was spent for each side. And after a3, the position is basically lost for black. Couldn't find any compensation. And in fact, white ends the game with 9 minutes and 20 seconds on the clock, and we have 3 minutes 35 seconds on the clock for black. And that was game 1, ended with a win. Now we look at game 2. Our winner is black in this game, so we're going to take it from his perspective. We have e4, c5, knight of 3. I won't show the move order. I'll actually just, I don't know how to get rid of this entirely. Maybe you guys could mention how to do that. But we have knight c6, d4, going for the open Sicilian. And we have the Sveshnikov Sicilian with d6, bishop g5, a6. All of this is theory. And now this is basically taken. And what do we have here? So black has the bishop here. This is pretty obvious, some queenside space, but a horrible pawn on d6, a weak knight, and after knight e3, white is going to have two fantastic knights in coordination with each other and excellent control over f5 and d5. And where this light square bishop goes is a bit unpredictable, but usually could go here or to just e2. And black is basically saying, I have a bit of the center with my e pawn on e5. I have a weak square on d5 that I've given to. It's a positional win. But after castles, we're gonna have f5, and we're gonna have dynamic counterplay on the queen side and king side. So we've already established queenside space, and we're gonna have f5 coming, and if the pawn ever takes, there's going to be a 2-on-0 majority. So very imbalanced position. Obviously, I prefer white. I prefer the positional advantages all the way. We have bishop e2, rook b8 to protect b6 because this queen might move. Bishop b6, and knight goes back. I was surprised this didn't happen because if this capture happens, we still have white still has good control over d5, and and with this, now there's no knight on d5. This knight on c2 is weird. Like, the difference is that this knight is technically here. Like, instead of a knight here, you should have a knight here with this. But we have knight back to e3, knight e7, preparing either d5. If black gets d5, black is just better in this position. Not only does black equalize, but black has good central control because this e-pawn is there. So if black can get rid of that weakness, black is just better. We have a3, d5, a series of trades, and now the position has opened up. Black has the two bishops, central control, and this bishop is very active, this bishop is very active. This bishop's going to come back, maybe queen d7, and then not to h3, but black has piece activity, double the two bishops, and some central control. Black is just better. We have knight to e3. Now this invites a trade, obviously, because like this heavily weakens and isolates the e-pawn, but it is on a dark square. Most of white pawns are on dark squares, and this is a light square bishop. You might even be able to trade it off with bishop f3, and if e4 is ever played, that actually might benefit white because now the activity of this bishop is hindered, right? But maybe after e5 you could have like queen g5, and the file has opened up, so black chooses to keep the two bishops, keep the activity, even trade the queens, but now we have expansion of the two pawns on the king side. We have rooks are completely off the board, but two bishops are just going to be staring down the board, and the king side majority is going to be mobile and moving. This is a weak queen side structure. You want to get the c-pawn rolling and get that 3-on-2, but that's going to be a while. So we have f5, very committal move. We permanently weakens this pawn, but if you can defend it and maybe advance it to e4, g5, get your king side majority going, then you're doing pretty well. And oh yeah, here f3, here after the move, okay, after the move f3, this weakens the diagonal. Now we have the pin, and after king f2, black just wins a piece. Like, we just have a blunder right here. Like, f3 was the worst one. This is like a bad move. It just doesn't do anything. If you want to prevent e4, just let it happen. You don't even have to do anything. Maybe play g3, or maybe even bishop f1. Yeah, g3, bishop f1, bishop g2, and just hold on. Like f3, now your knight has no protector. Bishop b6, and you're just lost. So then we just have winning of the knight, getting rid of the pawns, and white resigns. So basically a blunder. In this whole game was basically just white not realizing that these two knights need to be active and in the center. Retreating back is just not enough, and white just relinquishes control of d5. That's what made him just worse off in the middle game, and we just have a blunder, and that which led to black winning. So that was basically round 2. Round 3, we have our winner of the tournament as white again, and we have d4. I'm actually going to speed this up a little bit. d4, knight f6, g3, going for that same system as in the first game, but with b3, probably to play c4 and have a bishop opposing the king's Indian bishop. a4, c5, knight a3. Why? Probably because you don't want to develop it here, blocks the queen, and you don't want to develop it here to block the bishop. So we have pawn takes, And now e5 is an interesting move, but heavily weakens here. Maybe even d5 to sacrifice a pawn, but with moves like maybe queen g5 or queen b6, not even queen b6, but a6, this comes back, knight b6, yes, there's a trade, but the light square bishop is gone. I mean, I don't really know what to do from here. We have rook b8, getting out of the pin, maybe pushing the b pawn in the future, although that weakens this, so you might see a6, queen c7, in order to control c6, maybe get out of the fork and prepare b5, c4, and in these positions you usually have black looks for pawn breaks with d5 or b5, and this is usually prepared by e6 d5 or a6 b6 this, then d5, or a6 b5, but with 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces controlling b5. There's no way that b5 is going to happen, and d5 is under control by 2 pieces as well. Maybe we'll have knight b6 to help with this. But no, we have knight c5. This move really doesn't do anything. I mean, you're not really threatening to go to e4 because you can kick it out with f3, or queen c2, which is what happens in the game, controls e4 and prevents the knight from entering entirely. And now it's going to be kicked out soon, or maybe not. Maybe because this knight is not really doing anything. Maybe you want to just keep it there and have it as a target for later. Knight e6 invites the trade. Now, obviously, the instinct is just to not trade because black has less space. You don't want to trade pieces. You have that queenside space, the bishop staring down, open d-file, open diagonal. Like, what's the point of trading? It just helps. I mean, again, black doesn't understand that. White is saying that you can trade, but you are going to be the one moving your knight to c5, e6, and white is not even going to take. He's going to let you take, and you're going to be moving your knight. Like, you've been moving your knight. How many moves was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, just to get that trade off. And in the meantime, we have the rook developing, the bishop opening up, control of b5. Black is behind, and now c6 is very weak. We have a5 to weaken the pawn chain that the bishop is staring at. We have bishop b7, trade of bishops, and now a6. Look at that pawn wedge. Lots of, even though white has traded off that light square bishop, the light square control of the queen side is a force to be reckoned with. So we have rook b8, knight b5. How are you defending this pawn? Queen d7? Okay, e4. Maybe even e5 here. And if something like knight to g4, you'd have just takes. Like e5 would have been a move here. Because now with this, there's 2 attacks. So I don't really see what would be the problem here. We don't have e5. We'd rather have queen there. And now maybe e5, that actually does work because of takes, and you're just up a bishop here. So e5 would have worked here. There's nothing to be afraid of. But we have queen e7. Now e5, but the difference is there's no double attack. And now you can take because overloaded queen, defending 2 pieces, the pawn and the knight. So that is exploited, and black accepts the loss of a pawn, tries to activate the rook, but queen b2 defends the pawn and really negates any activity, because if the queen moves, this pawn is going to move. It's protected by the rook. This rook never moved, but is doing such a good job with helping this pawn out. We have queen e5 centralizing, queen a6, b4, just advance. We have basically a fork because if this happens, actually queen takes. Because if queen takes, how are you stopping this? Oh, and that's actually what happened. We have takes, and you just win. And white just basically wins the game with restricting black and knowing that black doesn't really have is not familiar with these types of position, with like sort of a Maroxy bind after e4, you have these, just a beautiful position from white. I mean, honestly, you cannot ask for anything better than this. But yeah, we just have good space, open d-file. Always love the open d-file. The two bishops doing wonders. I mean, what did this bishop really do? This knight never moved. It only moved when it was time to, like, it never actually even moved. None of these two pieces did anything, like, at all. It was just white in control. And that was basically round 3. Round 4, we have our winner as black in this position, in this game, sorry. And we have e4, c5, and the Smith-Morra gambit. Always take the first pawn, but on the second move, on the second pawn that is offered, you either advance or counterattack. And that's what black does, counterattack. And white, again, offers up the pawn on e4. This time, it's a little different. Where's that activity coming from? Okay. There's a little bit of piece activity, but again, white just sacrifices a pawn. I would prefer here, because it attacks the queen, and if will it really go back to d1, then he'll play bishop c6, stabilize. But we have knight back. Now bishop d7, and the thing is, yeah, you have knight there, but like a little bit less stable of position. I mean, you're up 2 pawns here. Or you just, I mean, I don't, does black even care about that pawn? Like, did he know? I mean, you have such a big pawn mass that a pawn doesn't even really matter. The 2 bishops, the rook, the uncastled white king because that knight d3 check. What? You offer up the bishop because there's a fork? Are you sure about that? Knight c3? Wow. I mean, I wouldn't have played that. I mean, you're so much better here. There's no reason to play any complex moves. And I mean, look at this pawn on f3. Freezing. This pawn on f3 freezes up the king and the rook. White should activate it this way. And look at that. Black stops white from activating it. There's absolutely no way that... Basically, black is putting white in a cage here. And he's just going to gobble up the pawns. What? Just take... and then play this, and then you win. Or no, sorry. This, this rook. Wait, no, sorry. The rook is defending. I didn't think it was defending. There's no... Is there a cleaner way to just win? I mean, okay, just advance. And checkmate. Yep, that's... I mean... Already, like, after the 4th move, like 2, 3, on the 4th move, yeah. White just doesn't know what he's doing. He just blunders the pawn. And okay, give it check, but it doesn't really accomplish anything. And if you're wondering why none of this or this, well, because this is a beautiful move. It attacks the bishop. You can't capture this because you got to defend it. And it also defends f7. You can't take it. And this bishop has to move now. And it gets taken. And with bishop c6, the position is stabilized. h6 didn't need to be played, really. You could play f6 even, and just e5. Like h6. Okay, I guess you want to play f5 straight away. But I mean, this is just such a paralyzing position. White can't do anything, and this king is not castled. And with after you develop, like, why not just this? Maybe f. Yeah, you can't even play g3 because of that bishop on c6. So there's no easy way. Maybe h3, but not. But then you would have. Obviously, this is under attack. But if this was defended, you could probably take and play f5. And again, this can't go here, and you just have much better. You're winning here. Okay, so that was a pretty quick game. We have round 5. Our winner is white in this game, and again goes for that Catalan style game, but black plays completely symmetrically until the move c6, where we have actually the trade with knight e5, because the point is, okay, if you take and this happens, you will have slightly better piece activity if you are white, because after rook here, bishop f4, there's some looming, like the thing is, this versus this is the point of contention here. Like, this bishop can't develop anytime soon because this knight is going to move. And the two bishops for white are powerful. The knight is very active compared to black's knight. But I obviously don't want to take. You could just play queen b6. That could be a move. Like, if you have takes, like, if white goes for this pawn, you go for the pawn on d4. So queen b6 was an option. And now the pawn on the bishop on e6. What is it doing? That was just a bad move. Now the pawn on the c pawn is weakened. And look at that. Look at that. Look at what this light square bishop did. Black didn't really handle. Like, we had one move. Then we have another move. Then we have another move. I mean, look. White is developing the bishop, the rook, getting the knight to c5, and black is just wasting way too many moves trying to trade off the light square bishops. There was absolutely no need to do that. You should have focused on counterplay on the queen side, maybe advance this a pawn, and get that knight to d7 to trade off this active knight. Okay, this happens, but the c5 square is so weak. And even after the trade of pawns, white is like significantly better because of the fact that these rooks are active. I mean, maybe you can, now you could probably hold this, like after everything has been traded. I think, wait a minute, white like accepted way too many trades. Like, why didn't even need to take the knight on d7? You could probably play queen here. And if e5, just take. And if this happens, there's no need to, because you're going to play queen out anyway. You see, you play that, but you don't, like, the thing is, when your opponent offers you a trade, you don't just say, okay, let's trade. You let him come to you. There is absolutely no benefit to trading right now, because let's say you play queen a4, knight b6. Yes, he's winning tempo on you, but it's not really worth it, because after moves like queen here, and then like this, alright, yeah, like queen, like, you don't want to trade pieces because you have more space. Trading pieces benefits the person who has less space, and even though you have a positional advantage with the square on c5, in order to win a game, you need two weaknesses. One weakness is not enough, and if you're black, you're saying, okay, let's trade pieces, and if I only have one weakness, I can defend it. And the c pawn is a weakness, okay, but it's defended. What are you going to do? There's the same amount of attackers as defenders. e3. Okay, let's get the rooks. Queen a5, queen b6. Offer. Again, no need to take first. You could even play a5, and then maybe push the a pawn forward. And then maybe take, and then after capture, rook here. Or even get the rook behind the pawn and just advance, play rook a6, and you're fine. But when you are the one bringing your pieces, wasting moves to try and trade, you lose. And we just have blundering of the pawn, because now this should have been done probably. Because, I mean, there's too much pressure here. What can black really do? Black is overloaded. The pin is now exploited, and white is just up a pawn. Now, granted, black could probably still hold this. Like, is there really any easy way for black to get through? I mean, white to get through. We have the e pawn advancing. Wow, look at that, exploiting another pin with the rooks. And if you take, I mean, you have this. But what about rook b6? And let's hit this. Okay. Like, you can just get the rook behind the pawn. Maybe get some activity. I mean, your king is active. You could probably just bring the rook here and then stop the pawn, and then maybe bring your f. Like, black is active, so I don't understand why, like, this, even though this pawn is lost, you could take this one, but instead that c pawn is still there and can become a dangerous pawn very soon. And now look at this. Black overextends with g5. This was absolutely the not correct idea, because now h5 is weak. You're not going to play h4 because that just like the king's going to walk over and get it. So now we have h4 to pressure this, and whatever it does, this pawn is going to be lost. And we see that. Now, why sacrifice the pawn now? Well, you're going to win the 2 pawns on the king side. So that c pawn, even though pretty advanced, you get to win 2 pawns. Maybe even this move. I'm not sure about there, because gotta get that rook behind the pawn and just advance it. Like, there's no reason to just play these mediocre moves, because now it's stuck on the rank, which is different. You don't want it stuck on a rank because the king can easily get to it. If you had it on the file, like, the king is now gonna get to it. It's gonna take longer for the king to get to it. So you have this, where yes, the pawn is lost, but that 3-on-1 majority is just completely winning for white. I mean, you have all the checks, you restrict the king, and then you get that pawn break in, and this 2 on 0 is just way better than having this outside pawn, because it can easily be trapped down, and the king can't. It's too far away from the king to protect it. The white king is helping these pawns go forward, and this king is very passive, and you have an active rook defending the rank and keeping an eye on the pawn. And importantly, when you have this rook on a1 and the pawn on a2 ready to promote, usually you have like lurking threats, like check and then promote. But here, the pawns actually guard the king from any checks. Like g4. If black were to move here, you could actually have this take, but then you take with check, and this king now is in a good position to defend against the promotion. But because white is up ahead a move, the pawns are constantly defended. And again, nice little maneuver. Nice little maneuver to f6, because if king to g6, the same thing would happen. You'd have this, although this is actually losing because of this line where you have takes, and this pawn promotes. So yeah, the pawns are so advanced now that it doesn't matter where you move the king. There's just going to be promotion. I mean, you could have promoted, but look at that. At least take the pawn while you're at it, and just a win. I mean, honestly, I like to find the most efficient way, so maybe, I mean, looks pretty good from here. Maybe queen here to try and go there, but white just wins because of the superior pawn structure. Maybe black could have held it if he had not overextended on the king side, but there was absolutely no reason to go with g5. You need to bring your king here. And if this happens, you have this. And if this, get it behind the pawn, and you're good, and keep this king at bay. So if we have here, you play king here, and you just keep the king at, no, I mean, you don't even do that. You keep the rook here, and try and go gobble up some of your, like, you pressure the pawn so that this rook doesn't have an easy time going for this. And if this happens, you can advance and try and go after white's pawns. Like, try and trade off all of this, and also, or maybe just get the king over here. But you definitely want to be behind the pawn so you can check and come back. Like, what does the engine say? Like, if we go for the computer analysis, I disabled it. If we go for computer, like, what does the engine say about this position? We have, I mean, white is better, but you see that even though you're down a pawn, you can still probably hold it. Like, yeah, I mean, this, and white is winning because he gets the f pawn here. And like, there was no, like, in this position, even though you're like, white is plus 0.6, it's still holdable. But you don't have rook b6. And now if this happens, you can have it here. And it's going to be hard for white to get a rook there. I think that was the goal, actually. Like, you want to pressure these two with this rook. because if you just double, it's going to be defended. So you want to pressure both pawns, and black was not able to prevent it. And we actually have, like, if you look at the computer analysis, we have like all of this, and we actually have a winning advantage here, right? Because this cannot occur. Sorry. Sorry for that sneeze. And if this happens, we can actually have this because it comes with check. And even though you get the king there, now you have a 4 versus 3. You don't sacrifice that e pawn to get the d pawn. But this was missed, but white still had like the overwhelming advantage throughout the whole game. And let's actually look at the computer analysis for all the games. If you go back, let's turn off the engine. The opening was okay. This game, yeah, we had that Catalan style with the overextended bishop. And white is able to exploit it and just made a mistake. Okay, but now then white realizes, okay, you know what? I realize that this bishop is trapped. Let's just go get it, and white wins. I mean, in all of the games, if you're playing in all the games that Tony played as white, his opponent did not have an advantage. Like if you look at the computer analysis, like obviously when you're black, your opponent's gonna have an advantage because the engine is just gonna say white has the advantage. But then after black has the advantage, that's it. Black just wins the game. And if you have that computer analysis here, same thing here. Black just never has has a very, very slight advantage here. But after that, after knight takes, queen c2 is a mistake because b4 was best. You want to entice the knight forward. And if not, well, you just have it now even bigger space advantage. So maybe b4 was good, but white Tony just consistently played better than his opponents every step of the way. And we'll take a final look at the computer analysis here, where he played he played black and he won. You have doing pretty well in the opening, obviously did well in the middle game towards the end game. And yeah, black just, pretty early, d5 is actually an inaccuracy. Yeah, this is a good move, but in principle, just because the engine says, oh, it's not a good move, practically speaking, this puts pressure on white. If you have this, knight f6, c4, e5, yes, c4 might be played, but you probably have this, just a normal position. But d3 probably is the better move because the c pawn now serves no function. Before, when you play d5, there's potential for it to help out the pawn. But yeah, consistently good play from Tony here. Congratulations to him for winning. We have our Grand Prix tournament tomorrow. This is 9 o'clock on August 1st, Sunday. So tomorrow we have our Grand Prix at 1 p.m. Please register if you haven't already. If you win, you'll be featured in the video that analyzes the top 5 games. And I'll see you later. Bye.